Hello, this is Richard Wilson, and welcome to this expert audio interview with Brian Tracy. At one point in my own life, I was an investment sales and capital raising job in Boston, and it was through listening to Brian Tracy's audiobooks over and over again during my commute every day to work that I went from not making any sales or raising any capital to raising millions of dollars every week in my job. I then went to go on from there to run a team of 20 plus professionals and $1 million plus a year business as well. And I owe a lot of that success to Brian Tracy, who's on the call with us today. Brian Tracy has given over 5,000 speeches in over 50 countries. He's written over 45 books, and he's also been one of the top three most influential people in my own success in marketing, sales, and capital raising. He's well known for two of my favorite books, Eat That Frog, 21 Ways to Stop Procrastinating and Get More Done in Less Time. And the second book is called Goals, How to Get Everything You Want Faster Than You Thought Possible. So Brian, thank you very much for your time today and joining us here for this interview.
It's a pleasure. Nice to be with you.
Great. So I'll just jump into the first question here. Everybody that I work with personally on my own team, people that I meet at workshops that I put on or at conferences, they have these goals in mind. They want to raise $100 million. They want to launch a new product, a new division, a new investment fund. And they have these marketing or capital raising related goals. And I've read your book on goals, but I'm wondering if you could share maybe your number one tip for accomplishing a very challenging or large marketing or capital raising goal.
Well, I think that the critical thing is the product or service that you're trying to raise money for. And probably the best description of that, people should say when they hear about it, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to bring to the market, they should say, geez, that's a great idea. Or, geez, why hasn't somebody else thought of that before? Mm-hmm. Or that's an incredible idea. In other words, the more a person is delighted or astonished or happy with your product or service idea, the more willing they are to put up money for it. I've worked with people who come up with an idea, and people throw money at it. They say, geez, can I give you some money? Can I get a piece of that? Right from the beginning. So if your concept is good, everything else becomes much easier. If your concept is unclear, then everything else is harder. So my favorite word, as you know, Richard, is clarity, clarity, clarity. And the critical clarity is what is the transformation that is going to take place in the customer's life or work when they buy and use your product? And how profound is that? How important is that? The old saying is if you could come up with a cure for cancer, you'd be a billionaire by the end of the week. Because the profound result. So always start with the product, always start with the service, always start with the customer, and how this product or service will dramatically improve the quality of the life or work of the customer.
Okay. So have a very good understanding of what your customer's perspective is, what they want, and a very clear picture of exactly how your solution is going to be amazingly valuable to them, I guess.
Yes, and it has to be either amazingly valuable to someone who will pay an enormous amount of money for it, or it has to be valuable to an enormous number of people who pay a small amount. And also the person you're talking to, especially if you want to raise capital or raise support, has to personally say, I want that. I like that. Mm-hmm. That sounds really great. I want that for myself.
Right. Okay, great. And then I like to talk a lot about authority building techniques. I look up to people like yourself who have built such a great position within the industry. And the pushback I always get is about people being too busy, especially people who are starting to find success or they're already in charge of a business or an investment fund of some type. And their pushback on building their authority further is really about a time excuse. But then there's other people who kind of rise above that. They find time to speak, write books, build their authority year after year after year. And you've really mastered that process more than any other expert I know with your 45 books and 300 plus training programs out there. How have you been able to write so many books, and what is your number one secret to getting all of that done?
Well, I began writing books after speaking for several years, and I realized that when you have a written book, people think that you're smarter than you really are. It's kind of like a joke. But it marks you as an authority, and it's interesting. People will buy your book and hire you without reading the book, just because you have a book. And you have a book on a subject that they think is of interest to themselves or, in this case, to their companies. My secret for writing is going back to clarity. I'm very clear about what I want to accomplish, the goal. And then the next two are focus and concentration. And as you know, I've probably spent my whole life both practicing those two and teaching them. Focus on a single point, and concentration. And concentrating single-mindedly until it's done. Now, I just finished a book 2 weeks ago on schedule, and the book's scheduled for publication. It's already signed, sealed, delivered. In the next 2 days, I need to finish my next book, which is coming out 3 months later in 2012, because I write and publish 4 books a year.
Okay.
I publish them 90 days apart, and I publish books that have at least 1 million potential buyers. And I just signed a contract last month to write 21 ebooks that will be produced between now and the end of the year, and will go out through 32 ebook sales media worldwide. And the whole ebook business is completely different, but everything is focused and concentration. How can you write the book? It's because I put my head down and I do only one thing for an extended period of time. And I'll structure my time and I'll plan it and I'll carve out pieces of time, and then I'll just put my head down and work. If anybody wants to write a book, by the way, I have a little outline on my website, briantracy.com, called How to Write a Book. It's free. And I've had many people, they send me, just last week I got a book saying, I did it. I got a sticky on it. I did it. And here's a copy of the book. They got those 20 points, and they wrote and published the book within 90 days.
Wow.
And they sent me a copy of the book.
Wow,
and so
great.
is it possible to do it? Yes. Just follow the formula, follow the recipe. And I learned this recipe as a result of my own experience. I found that in order for me to talk about building authority, actually the word I like to use is credibility. You have to have a book. However, to promote a book, they'll only promote a book that's only come out in the last 90 days. So after 90 days, the window shuts, and you can't get interviews. And interviews are the cheapest, almost inexpensive way of talking to thousands of people. So I said, well, if I want to be continually being interviewed for books, I have to write a book every 90 days, which is crazy reasoning. So then I went out, and I would write a book, and I would get in touch with different publishing companies. And, of course, some of my books sold very well, so they would listen to me. And I said, I have a great book title, so that they would say, we're interested in that, and then they started to come to me. So now I have 7 or 8 publishers nationally in the U.S. and Canada. I have about 30, 40 publishers worldwide that came from those publishers. So I come up with a book, and I say, okay, I'll go to a publisher. I say, I have a book idea for you. And they say, yes, we like it, or no, we don't. But always somebody says yes. And I said, good, let's work out its publishing schedule, drop dead date, when you need the manuscript, and so on. I pump out, like a production line, 4 books, 4 different publishers every single year.
Wow. Okay, great. That's very, very helpful. And then connected to that question, what are your suggestions for not just writing a lot of books, 4 books every year, but making the book very valuable and very popular? You mentioned that you like to write books that have an audience of 1 million people or more, but what's kind of your number one tactic for actually selling a lot of books? Is it doing a lot of those interviews, and it's really just keeping those interviews constant, so you're kind of mentioned everywhere in the press and the media and the news? Is that would be your number one tip, or is there another tactic like corporate sales or your speaking engagements, getting people to buy 1,000 books at a time where you're speaking?
Well, you start off with your subject, and perhaps the greatest insight, $1 million insight I can give anybody is find a big problem and then solve it in a big way. And this simple concept is what is a big problem or need that people have? And then how can I solve it in such a way that it kills the genre? That after that, nobody will write in that area. So, for example, my book, Eat That Frog, it's the best-selling time management book in the world. It sold millions of copies in 38 languages. Well, what was the biggest time management problem that people have is procrastinating. So I took and I said, Eat That Frog, 21 great ways to stop procrastinating and get more things done faster. That's my value. My publisher just told me last month, he said, your title must be so good that people will buy the book, and they'll buy it on the basis of the benefit that you offer in the title. And they won't even read the book. They just carry the book around. And so the title has to be so strong that people spasmodically, their hand jerks out to buy the book, to reach for the book. So if you want a book that's going to sell well, for example, a perfect example is Jim Collins' book, Good to Great. How companies go from good to great. Sold millions of copies. It's a perennial bestseller. And why? It's because everybody who's running a business wants their company to be a great business.
Mm-hmm.
And then he follows up. And this is really important, Richard. You have to deliver. Whatever promise you make, you've got to deliver on that promise in your book. So people say, geez, I'm glad I read this book. And they don't want to put it down, and then they want to tell everybody else about it.
Right.
Then you can use every marketing technique that's out there. Some people buy 1,000 copies of my books and hand them out to everybody. Some people, like Oprah, advertised one of my books, and it went out and sold 50,000 copies because on the Oprah newsletter, she said everybody should read this book. And it was on self-discipline. If you want to it's called No Excuses, The Power of Self-Discipline. So if you want to be successful, stop making excuses and take action. And the book shows you progressively how to do that. So you always say, what is something that people really need? And if the book is on a subject that has a small need, like Tom Lencioni's book is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Mm-hmm. Every single person who has a business, who has people working with them, is very interested to know, I wonder what they are. And it becomes a bestseller.
Right.
Because he's dealing with something that people really want. And then all your marketing techniques will work. None of your marketing techniques will work unless the subject is the subject is something that people want instantly, based on the title, and then you deliver. And people say, I really got my money's worth.
Right. Which I love that as a piece of advice, because I'm a big fan of studying kind of that John Carlton copywriting best practices, and it really comes down to just having, it's basically your headline, the book title is, you have to grab the person, I think is what you're saying, and then deliver the goods after you've made the promise. But I think that's a really unique piece of advice I haven't heard before by other people who, have sold a lot of books. Many people recommend doing 500 different tactics, and it's hard for them to come up with the number one most powerful thing, but that's interesting. Okay.
There's a book called 1,001 Ways to Promote Your Book. Buy it. It's in paperback. It costs $10. If you buy it on Kindle or iPad, it's probably costs $9.99.
Right.
But there are 1,001 ways. The starting point is the book has got to be really good.
Right.
And I bought books that were highly recommended, and I read 1 or 2 chapters, and I'm so disgusted I throw them away. I very seldom throw a book away, but there are some books that are so poorly done. The hype is great, and I wouldn't buy a book from that person ever again.
Right.
The reason my books sell so well, as you mentioned, I've got now 52 books, and I'll have another 20 books by the end of the year, short books, between 8 and 10,000 words, because that's where the market is going, to short books, high content, as opposed to longer books, because people won't read longer books anymore, and it's going to electronic books. So you do 2 things. You get on the bandwagon, short, high-content books, electronic. Now the thing is that you have to deliver on your promises, and that's the key.
Right. Great. And then I have another question about more of a marketing sales question. I work with a lot of people who raise capital, or business owners who have to make sales constantly, big complex type sales, long sales cycles. It could take many months to make a big sale. And I know you've done a lot of sales training, both with corporations and individuals in your training programs. What would be your number one suggestion for moving past your competitors and selling more within these kind of complex relationship-based sales environments?
Well, because of your expertise about the milestone method, or the production line method, which means that the customer has there's a series of questions that must be answered at every stage of the sale for the sale to move ahead. The first question is this person genuinely qualified? In other words, can they benefit more than the cost of your product or service from buying it? And that you need to find out in your initial contact. The second thing is, does this person have the authority to advance the sale, or do you have to go to a higher level? Do you have to have this person introduce you to a higher level? Because especially in a large sale, you have what I call gateways. These are people who cannot buy, but they are the first person you have to talk to before you get to someone else. So you think, what are the questions that need to be answered? Is this the right product for me? Can it pay for itself quickly and efficiently? Can I use it? Will it fit in with my business? And these are questions you have to ask, and these are all milestones. So in a large sale that may take, when I worked with IBM, they would sell a particular type of system that took 7 months to sell.
Mm-hmm.
And it took 7 months from the time you met the prospect, who was a genuine prospect who could use and need and benefit from your product. It took 7 months to move it through the pipeline. So for people to meet quota, they had to have their pipeline full by April,
Mm-hmm.
May, because it would take 7 months to close the sale. If they wanted to have their quota that year, they had to have all their prospects in the pipeline by May,
Right.
or they wouldn't make it. So that's what you do. And then what I do to encourage people to keep up their motivation is you have awards, benefits, prizes, congratulations at each of the milestones. And as you
Okay.
know, what large companies do is they do reviews of each client account and where are we in terms of what milestone are we at here. And by
Mm-hmm.
doing that, they can tell you pretty much how much they're going to sell in a given quarter or a given year, because they know how many of those that reach a particular milestone will eventually become a sale, and what the average size of that sale is and what the average profitability will be. So they can predict with tremendous accuracy based on the milestones.
I see. So your sales approach for these types of things should be marked with milestones, and it's ran like a well-oiled machine, and you know the conversion numbers, for
Yeah,
people
right.
who already. I see.
Yeah, write them down and track them. Um, it's interesting. There's a very good book that's just been written by a doctor, and it's called the Checklist Manifesto.
Right.
And it's a very simple concept that whenever you use it, you're amazed at the difference it makes. And what he found is they can lower the death rates from infections or mistakes within hospitals by 90% just by putting in a checklist so that no steps are missed. And in
Wow.
selling, using a milestone method, you put in a checklist. If you can imagine a pinball machine where you pull you pull the spring and you let it go, and the ball goes up to the top and it goes boing, 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 boing as it bounces down toward the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the same thing. Is the customer's mind has to go through boing, 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 boing before it drops to the slot. So you
Mm-hmm.
write down what are the steps that the customer's mind has to go through before they ultimately reach the point where they will say yes. And you think of those, and those become your checkpoints.
I see.
Now, here's an interesting thing. You can sit down with a customer, and you can say, Mr. Prospect, I'll be completely transparent with you. What we have found is that for a person to buy and really maximize the benefit from our products or services, they have to go through these steps in thinking. And these are the questions that they have at each step of the way. And what my job is to answer these questions for you satisfactorily so that you can make the best decision for yourself and your company. People love it when you're transparent like that.
Right.
And then you help them with the questions so they don't have to be wondering, geez, have I left anything else? You give them the checklist, and you go
Right.
through the checklist with them. So here's question number one. Will this pay for itself? So what IBM would do is they would explain the IRR method, the internal rate of return, is how much does money cost you, how much will you earn or save from installing our product or service, and the critical question is time to payback.
Mm-hmm.
When you're selling, especially to business, the critical term is time to payback. How long will the product or service pay for itself? The shorter the time to payback, the faster the buying decision. But it is not the customer's job to figure this out. It is your job to ask them for the information, get the information, say, based on what you've told me, if you install and use our service, your time to payback will be 3 months and 7 days. Your time to payback will be 9 months and 15 days. And so therefore, that's a very high return on investment, internal rate of return. Where else could you get a return on investment which is approximately 134% per annum? You put this money in, you get 134% back to your bottom line in 9 months and 15 days. In other words, when you point that out to them, it becomes a no-brainer.
Right.
Person, it's easy to sell internally, it's easy to buy. And then your job, and again, you work with grown-up companies, their job is to make darn good and sure that they fulfill on their promise. We will work with you hand in hand, arm in arm, to make sure that you get the benefits and results that we promised.
Okay. Great. Yeah, that sounds like advice that I don't think is taken too often within the complex sales that I'm used to doing, or that I'm used to training in, like in the hedge fund industry or in capital raising, or even in business to business sales contracts, I usually not myself, and I don't hear of other people calculating the IRR for their clients and kind of making the argument for them so they can show it to the rest of their team and get it approved right away. But that does make a lot of sense.
Yes, it
Great.
sure does, because your job, I said this, Richard, your job is to make it easy for your customer to buy. Let me
Mm-hmm.
repeat that. Your job is to make it easy for your customer to buy. And it's so simple. And they say, really, yes, make it easy. Don't make it hard. Don't make it
Right.
difficult. Make it easy.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good reminder. I think that my next question is a little bit more towards geared towards business owners, and this question is about people who are running businesses at say 500,000 a year or $1 million a year in revenue. When your business was there at one point, or when you're coaching people with businesses of that size, what would be the number one focus that the business owner should take to get their business to that next level, to 5 million or $10 million in revenue? Like what do you see as the number one roadblock, or the number one thing that they really need to do in most cases, that is the most important thing they should be focusing on at that point?
Well, I went through this. I went through this exact same process myself this year, and I
Mm-hmm.
said, and I wanted to achieve sales of $100 million on a new product.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and it goes back to what I said a little bit earlier, which is so simple yet so profound, is find a big problem that a lot of people have and solve it in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so what is a problem that a lot of people have? And what I came up with was this idea that a lot of people have, that there are 30 million businesses in America,
Mm-hmm.
and of these, 29.6 million, of these, about 90% or more are struggling. At least they're struggling, or they want to do better, and
Sure.
they don't know how. Okay, so I said, well, if I could put together a program that would help these business owners, it would give them a whole series of great ideas based on years of experience, almost like a practical MBA in one audio program, which I'm qualified to do,
Mm-hmm.
and then lower the price really, really low, so that it's a no-brainer. A person
Right.
would look at. Then if I could sell 1 million of those at $100 each, that would be $100 million. So I said, okay, what would have to be in a program for it to sell for $100 million? And it would have to have all of these ingredients. And so I designed the program on that basis. I ran it up a couple of flagpoles of professionals in the industry. They said, oh my God, OMG, OMG, as your kids say, OMG. They said, this program will work. It'll sell in all the big box stores. You can sell $250,000 in Walmart over the
Wow.
weekend, because Walmart has 4,700 stores and they promote it. But Walmart has a requirement. With Walmart, it has to be less than $50.
I
You have to
see.
sell it for less than $50. So we'll sell it for $49.95.
Right.
And the pricing works for us. And so now Walmart, Costco, Price Club, every bookstore, even though they're fading away, and the programs have all been produced. They arrived on my desk. It's called Business Success Made Simple. It's 12 solid hours of materials with a PDF of all the key notes and $100 worth of downloadable internet-based video learning programs on the subject, plus a complete business analysis that you can do for yourself to determine the strengths and weaknesses and areas of opportunity for your business. Now, I'm not trying to sell it because I wouldn't waste your time for $49.95, but every business owner in America, if I said, here's a program, and it's guaranteed for a year.
Right.
Here's a program that can double, triple, quadruple your sales and profitability. It's $49.95. It's unconditionally guaranteed for a year. How many people wouldn't buy it?
Right.
The reason I mention this is not because of my program, because I have a whole series of programs like that, is that
Sure.
this is the way you have to think. You have to think, if I want to raise $100 million, or if I want to sell $100 million, or if I want to double my revenues, what product or service could I develop, and what price could I charge for which there are a large number of people who would buy it from me and pay me the amount I need to charge to make that profit? So you work back from there. And it's quite astonishing. You know that 80% of all products and services that will be in the market in 5 years do not exist today.
Hmm.
So therefore, always be innovating, always be creative, always saying, what new products or services could I create? Could I represent? Could I joint venture? Sometimes you can find someone else who has a fabulous product or service that you can use your existing business or resources to sell, and you can double your sales and income in your business by selling somebody else's product to the same customers who are buying yours.
Sure.
Strategic alliances, joint ventures, um, what we call sell to OPC, other people's customers.
Right.
And how many other people have products that you could sell to your customers? So that's how you think, but you always think in terms of customer benefit. You always think is how could I really benefit people in such a high level that they would love to buy my product or service and recommend it to others.
Right, right. No, that makes a lot of sense. All right, great. That's something that I think every business probably needs to do, every quarter or every year. I was about to say that's something that I need to do, but I think that pretty much anybody who's running a business needs to constantly be doing this, right?
Yes.
Great. All right, so just a couple more questions here. Speed of implementation is one of my favorite business principles. I tend to talk about it a lot. I just wrote a really short book on it, kind of in line with what you were saying. The trend is going towards is short books with a lot of content. And
Yes.
is this idea of speed of implementation something that you're seeing as being very valuable for capital raisers, marketers, and business owners? And if so, how do you see that playing into their success, or how important do you think it is?
Yeah. The critical thing is, when a person wants to invest, the question they ask is how much in, how much out, how fast, how sure.
Mm-hmm.
Just strip it down to those four questions. How much do I put in? How much do I get back? How fast do I get it back? And how sure can I be that I'll get it back? Your job is to have the answers to those questions. So the first question is how much do you want? That's easy. Most people stop there. Second question, how fast will you get it back? And what you do is you give high, medium, and low scenarios. Is if it's really successful, this is the best likely, and this if it's medium successful, if it's low. Low should be so attractive the person's willing to invest, even if it has low return. The second question is time to market. How fast are you going to get this product or service to the market? Because people today, there's so much risk in timing. If it takes a long time to get the product to the market could have changed completely. And I like to use the Apple method of analyzing the market. Look how fast they come to market. They come out of the gates with an iPad, and I went out and bought one, and then wham, they got an iPad 2 with two video cameras in it, which my wife bought, and now they're talking about iPad 3, talking about iPhone 3, and they're creating markets. You saw their sales jump today. Their profitability jumped 124%. Sales are up 82%. They just opened 40 new markets. They now got the iPhone in 100 countries, which completely kicks the chair out from T-Mobile and all of the others.
Wow.
Who weren't in those, whose brag was that we're in these markets with BlackBerry. Now iPhone is in those markets, and nobody has a reason not to buy them. And they're selling like hotcakes. So speed, but they're moving fast. They're moving fast. You can imagine, like people on a treadmill in the Apple offices. They're not just sitting there with their feet up on their desk coasting. They're moving really fast. So speed is really important. Everybody has a need for speed, and you actually make your product or service or your services more attractive when you do them fast.
Right. And I guess that since you're writing 20 books between now and the end of the year, it's something that you're definitely not just advising other people to do, but you're actually taking constant action in your own business to produce more value more quickly, right?
Yes, and you can never stop. You can never coast. The joke is that you can coast, but you can only coast in one direction.
Down.
And nobody can coast. Nobody. People say, well, when does this incredibly intense pressure for results stop? It stops when you retire. It never stops. No matter how successful you've been in the past, the question is, what's your next miracle? What do you got for me now? Because what you did for me yesterday is forgotten so fast.
Right. One line within one of your audio programs that's always just kind of stuck rerunning in my head is that I think you recommend that if you can consistently do things quickly and well, you'll constantly be giving more responsibility. People will constantly be giving you more projects, and pretty soon you'll, be so much more successful than you were just 1 or 2 years ago. I think it's just such a valuable, thing for people to realize and really not just write off as, oh yeah, that's obvious, I should do things quicker rather than slower, but if you do it consistently on every valuable project you're assigned with, it can really make such a huge difference in your life or your sales success.
Yeah, it transformed my life completely to learn how to accept responsibility and do it quickly. Whatever you
Right.
say you will do it fast. I'll give you a little example. But perhaps one of the most popular business hotels in America or the world is Marriott.
Mm-hmm.
Marriott has a little game that they play with you. When you phone room service, and room service is almost like the pulse. You can tell how well a hotel runs by how well the room service runs.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Marriott, you call and you order anything, they say it'll be there within 30 minutes. And then they have a game to see if they can't get it there in 15 minutes. And it's the most amazing thing. You place the order, you have to run to the door because they're there with it.
Right.
And it's the same thing that Zappos did. Zappos took themselves from an idea to $1 billion company by overnight delivery. You
Right.
could order a pair of shoes by 5 o'clock today, and it'll be at your front door at 8:30 the next morning through a private messenger service. Paid both ways. If you don't like it, you can put it back in the box, and they'll pay return.
Wow.
They went from zero to $1 billion with speed and customer satisfaction.
Yeah,
And
it's
so,
pretty amazing.
yeah, there's nothing makes people more frustrated than to say, well, I'll get to it next week. Nothing makes people happier than to say, I'll get back to you today. I'll be in the mail. I'll email it to you. I'll drop it off personally. Bang, 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 fast.
Right.
Because people love fast. When you're fast, people think you're smart, think your products are of higher quality, think your management is of higher quality. They think that you're worth more, and they're willing to pay more money for it. So I'm really big into speed.
Right. Great. Oh, that's really valuable examples there. I love the Pursuit of Happiness, or the book about Zappos and how they got to $1 billion in value so quickly. It's a great
Yeah,
book as well.
delivering happiness. What a great
Delivering
title,
happiness.
delivering happiness.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so I just have one final $100,000 question for you. You already gave us a $1 million piece of advice about selling a lot of books and having a powerful proposition when you're coming up with your book title or benefit focus. But my last question is really about how, right now you're an enormous success, a top tier business speaker, a trainer known globally. But if you had to do it all over again, I know you could probably do it faster, better, more profitably with all of the depth of experience that you now have. So, my $100,000 question is for someone who wants to become a mini quote unquote Brian Tracy within their own little niche or industry over the next 20 years, and they really want to lay out a path of speed of implementation for projects they need to get done to kind of emulate your big success and follow in your footsteps. How could they do that? What's kind of your $100,000 piece of advice for following in your footsteps and kind of replicating the success that you've had?
Well, my success is unusual in that I responded to the market. When somebody called and asked me, could you do a seminar for us on selling? Then I would interview them to find out exactly what they sold and who they sold it to and design a seminar that was just for them. Then when somebody else from that industry called, say, yes, I've done work in this industry, and I would just piggyback on what I'd already done.
Mm-hmm.
Then they would say personal development or time management or leadership or even strategic planning. So I always responded to the market. In retrospect, there are speakers who earn $1 million a year who are very focused on a single market and are
Mm-hmm.
very focused on a single subject.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, something like profitability in growth strategies.
Sure.
All they focus on is for companies in the $10 to $50 million range, how they can increase their sales and profitability more rapidly by doing time-tested and proven things.
Mm-hmm.
I would suggest that you write a book, that you pick a subject, and imagine that you have the ability as a speaker to speak on many subjects. So pick a subject that you really love, that you really care about, that you really want to share with people, that you really think can be really helpful to your clients, because it's something then you'd love to learn about it, talk about it, upgrade your skills in it, and become very good at it. And write a book on your subject that has a unique twist, that has something in it that's really practical that people can use, and stick it in the first chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Don't hold back. Some people write a book and they hold back. You've got to read my whole book before you get to the secret success in chapter 12. No,
Right.
stick it in the first chapter. And so it's something that you love, something you care about, something that people really value and are willing to pay for, and make yourself the best in that area. Make yourself the go-to person in that area. If a
Right.
person wants to talk on, like I have friends who speak in car sales. There's about 2 or 3 of them. That's all they do is they teach car salespeople, and they're fully booked. Everybody
Hmm.
knows if you want to train your sales force, these are the top. These are the 2 or 3 of the top people in the country. Same with
Hmm.
real estate sales and so on. So specialization and
Hmm.
becoming really, really good at what you do are the keys to becoming a big success.
Okay, great. That's really valuable advice, and I think that just like some of the other advice you've given, it's the type of advice I think you need to hear every quarter or every year because there's always further refinement or another niche within a niche you could further become an expert on or further dominate with another 2 or 3 books on that topic or different angles on that topic. So, thank you for that great advice, and thanks for sharing the advice through this whole interview. That wraps up, the list of questions that I wanted to fit into this expert audio interview. And if anybody would like to learn more about Brian Tracy, you can visit briantracy.com, as he mentioned. There you can find his guide to quickly writing a book in 90 days. You can also learn about where Brian is speaking next if you want to go see him in person at one of his seminars or conferences. He has training programs available on his website, audio programs, and his latest books are featured there as well, obviously. So thank you again for joining us here today, Brian. I think I got a lot out of this interview, and I'll be listening to it several more times and taking more notes on what you've said here.
Well, just before you go, Richard, I just wanted to mention that we are offering what I call Total Business Mastery. It's an intensive 3-day mini MBA program, September 16th, 17th, and 18th in San Diego. And this program, we have people who run companies with 1,000 people, people who run companies with 3 or 4. It transforms a business. It's virtually every best idea for business transformation condensed into 3 intensive days. And I'd really like to encourage your listeners to attend it. Or if they like more information, if they want to attend it, come to briantracy.com/register. Or if they'd like to hear, I've done a 1-hour webinar that they can listen to that explains the seminar in greater detail, and it's briantracy.com/radio. So it's
Great.
briantracy.com register to get full information, or briantracy.com register for the webinar on July 20th. And
Great.
if that it's tomorrow, you may not get this out by that time, but this seminar is literally business and life transforming. It's called Total Business Mastery.
Total Business Mastery. Great. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that, and I do encourage everybody to check out briantracy.com. I've gotten such a massive return on the advice that Brian has shared in the past. That's why I've asked him to do this interview with me here today. And I'm not sure who we'll be interviewing down the road, but I guarantee you this will be one of the top 2 or 3 interviews I ever do for me because of how much I've followed his work and gotten such a huge return on the advice that Brian Tracy gives away and provides in his training program. So thank you again, Brian, for all your time and advice.
Thank you, Richard. You have a great day.
You too.